The following is a production of Frank DeFreitas and the Internet Museum of Holography.
Hello, folks, and welcome to HoloTalk for the week of May 24th, 1998. Our special guest this week is Jason Sapan from Holographic Studios in New York, and Jason's going to be speaking with us in just a few moments, filling us in on some of the work that he's done there at the studio and also the gallery he has there, and also some of his experiences working in holography over the years. His laser and holography studio is one of the oldest laser and holography studios in the world, and it's been a very interesting interview with Jason, so you want to stay tuned and listen to that. I have a new feature up at the website. It's a search tool for information on lasers and holograms. You can reach it by clicking on reference or links. Both of those buttons will take you there. And I believe it is the most powerful search tool today for laser and holography information on the Internet, hands down. I've spent weeks putting this together, and I think you will find it very interesting. You have a choice of over 50 keywords which are cross-referenced with lasers and holography. It goes out and it searches all the top search engines, but not only that, it compiles that information for you and brings it back into one result with the best selections according to whatever it is you told it to go out and get. With Usenet, which is the news groups, over 35 to 50,000 news groups, it will go out and bring back all of the posts that were made with lasers and holograms according to whatever keyword you chose in the list of over 50 in two ways. One, all of the posts that were made within the last 60 days, and the other, it goes back into Usenet archives and pulls out all the posts that were ever made on Usenet according to the information you were looking for. The third search goes out and queries over 100 newspapers and magazines and brings back all the articles that have been written according to whatever it is that you need information about. And the final search searches for books in print. In case you're looking for a book title or something in that nature, it will bring back the book title for you. So I think it's a very powerful search tool. It's my way of saying thank you for coming to the Webmuseum, and another responsibility that I have to make sure that my visitors have the best as far as information on lasers and holograms that there is to offer on the Internet today. Don't forget the webcam. The webcam's every week, Thursday night at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Saving Time right now, since we're in that part of the calendar year. Last week we had an interesting show. We had a microphone, not a microphone, we had a microscope. I have a microphone in front of my face. We had a microscope, and I took the webcam and attached it to the microscope right in the middle of the show. And then we took holograms and put them under the microscope and zoomed in on them in different microscopic powers. And we could see exactly what makes up a hologram on a microscopic scale. Very interesting images that were transferred on Thursday night. So if you were there watching the show, I hope you had a good time. Just a reminder, you don't have to sit staring at your screen listening to HoloTalk. You can surf the web while you're listening, and I would suggest that because Jason is a guest on the show this week, we do have a link to his website for Holographic Studios right on the HoloTalk page. All you need to do is just bring your browser to the front, click on your browser, bring it up to the front, click on Holographic Studios link, and it will take you right to his website, and you can actually browse his website while you're listening to the interview. So I'm not going to come back on after the interview's over. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday weekend. And I want to thank you for tuning into HoloTalk. Don't forget that we're here every week with a new show and always new guests or something new going on. So don't forget to tune in every week. And I will say good night now and turn it over to the interview that was recorded a little bit earlier in the week between myself and Jason. So thank you for tuning into HoloTalk. Take care. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your studio in New York? I know it's one of the oldest laser and holography studios in the country.
Probably in the world.
Probably in the world, yes, of course, in the world. Why don't you tell the listeners where you're located and a little background information on the studio?
Sure. Holographic Studios is located at 240 East 26th Street, which is between 2nd and 3rd Avenues in New York City. It's a free public gallery of holography, open in the afternoons on weekdays. It has a collection, probably the world's largest collection of integral, which are moving image holograms. In On hand at any one time is a collection of celebrity holograms featuring such people who've come in and posed as Andy Warhol, Phil Donahue, Isaac Asimov, John Cage, Billy Idol, Mayor Koch here of New York, John Kenneth Galbraith.
The Christmas Carol that you had in Lord
the one
Taylor.
at Lord and Taylor's.
At Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, right.
What was that all about?
Well, this year, every year Lord and Taylor's has Christmas windows, and they have a very big production where this year they had, I think it was Hal Linden, who was doing the Broadway stage production of A Christmas Carol. And he was like the master of ceremonies, and they had a big unveiling where the curtains come down on the windows, and they have a scene of little characters, of whatever it is. This year it was A Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. And, it's many windows, an entire block along Fifth Avenue. And for the special effects, the Ghost of Christmas Future, Scrooge's Partners, Marley's Ghost, for instance, we used holograms, and they were, of course, integral moving image holograms, and you would see, over a fireplace through a mirror, there would be a hologram of Marley, who looks sort of like Beetlejuice with the hair sticking out everywhere, and with a ball and chains and looking decomposed. Or the Ghost of Christmas Future, which looked like the Grim Reaper pointing, towards the cemetery, looking through the gates of the cemetery, things like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
And you also mentioned something about a project you're working with for Goodyear.
Yeah, we're doing I think it's a brochure cover for them. We just finished another thing for BASF for some vitamin E they're doing, and currently we're working with Iowa on a cover for CDs that's going to go out with software for some computer drives. Mm-hmm. And it's always a project.
Now, on your website, you have something mentioned about doing computer-generated holograms.
In fact, I
also.
just finished. Okay, there's another project I just delivered last week to the University of Michigan, a hologram composed of 270 separate JPEG files that were FTP transferred to me of an enzyme, I believe, called Serral, that is a transfer enzyme that's used in everything from bacteria to human beings, and its function is to transfer like RNA or ADP, the most important chemical processes for reproduction and energy transfer. And since bacteria are now becoming resistant to disease killing antibiotics, they are now targeting, rather than the bacteria itself, the enzyme that the bacteria needs to survive and reproduce. So this hologram was being used at a conference this week, presented to the man who came up with the structure of this particular enzyme in Grenoble, France, as his sort of award for it. And it turned out very well.
Is it just a regular modem, or do you have a high-speed connection?
No, I'm just working at, I'm downloading at 56, but nothing special. It's I'm in no particular hurry, Frank. What's the difference? I mean, let's say if I downloaded the whole thing in half an hour, the holography is going to take weeks anyway, so what's the point,
Do you have an automated process, or do you work...
The machine itself is automated. However, I would think that, as you know, the concept of automation in holography, it's an oxymoron. 99% of the work is, just manual and physical and almost debilitating at times. When it comes to computer transfer, in my case, I am not using a liquid crystal to project the images off the computer. Rather, I am transferring the files into a GIF viewer, projecting them on my computer monitor screen, transferring them to motion picture film, one frame at a time, and then running the motion picture through the holographic printer I have downstairs in the laboratory here. And that is automated in that, it'll advance one frame of movie film, the holographic film will move an increment, and then the shutter will open, it'll close, it'll wait for a settling time, it'll then advance a frame of movie film, and this is as tedious as can be. We're talking many hours at work, only to find out that somewhere you've carted off an edge of the molecule in this particular case, and you have to start over and do it all again. So, and then there's all sorts of distortional problems that you have by the fact that in integral holography, you are compressing the image. So when you're folding something up into a very tight space, there's a tendency for image distortion in that the image folds over onto itself and creates glitches and smears. So it's very tricky.
They call it time smear?
Time smearing is when something
different?
moves too quickly, especially on the vertical plane. It's most evident. Imagine a hand being in, let's say, a waving position where it's moving laterally left to right very quickly, and if both images would be visible at the same time, the whole thing would smear. So it's a very, very complicated process in that you can do everything technically correct holographically and technically correct cinematography-wise, and yet have the two not mesh on a transfer so that what you see just looks like a blur. And, when you're doing this for a client, people don't seem to have a very good sense of humor about images being smeared.
Oh, especially now with the high-res scanning and everything coming up.
And considering that holography doesn't look as crisp as things do on a monitor because the colors aren't as real. And but it's pretty impressive. I mean, for what it can do, the fact that you can take something that doesn't exist anywhere, that has never been built three-dimensionally, and just create it on a computer and transfer it to something where you can actually look around molecules. I've done computer-generated holograms for companies such as Mitsubishi of an engine, for NYU Medical Center of a heart showing the internal septums where it's transparent and you can see chamber through chamber and openings. And I've done molecules such as collagen and DNA. I think it's one of the processes of the future where holography serves a purpose in showing something in a way that no other medium can.
And with all this work that you're doing, you still manage to run a gallery.
Yeah.
You have it's a rather large gallery too, isn't it?
No, it's the only one in New York City.
Yeah.
That and a subway token will get you a ride.
Yeah.
I give classes here. I, of course, do a lot of commercial work, which I've always done. Got to support all this stuff.
You have something down about an internship program.
Yes, right. We regularly have interns. Some of my interns, one of them happens to be, at this point, not a current intern, but interns from the past. One of them went on to become the recording engineer for albums such as Madonna's Like a Virgin and David Bowie's Let's Dance and a couple of other very well-known albums. Another one is currently, I believe, I think it's either assistant or associate producer of the X-Files. They've become all sorts of different things. It's sort of exciting to see people that you've worked with go on and do something meaningful with their lives.
But at the time, they had quite an interest in working with holography as well, right?
Well, I think that it is, in many ways, a mind-opening medium, and it gives them an insight into the world around them that I think, gives them a professional edge in whatever they do.
Mm-hmm. You teach outside of your lab as well, a few educational institutions in the New York area, right?
I try not to now anymore. Now I try just doing it in the lab. Yes, I've taught at a couple of different schools at NYU and at School of Visual Arts, but I try now just to do it privately because, I have a family and I don't have quite as much free time to spend evenings at a school.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to, but it's a lot easier just to give private lessons anyway. You have a much more intimate relation with the students, and you're not in any way encumbered by the school's administration and policies about this or that, which, believe me, I'm sure you're well aware of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it can be crazy sometimes. I can tell you stories that would just make you laugh. I remember once at School of Visual Arts that they changed the heads of the department, and the new guy came in and felt that since this was a science credit, the introductory course should be taught by someone with a PhD. And I said, there aren't many PhDs in holography. This is going to be a problem. So he found someone with a PhD who gave the class. So I asked him, I said, can you explain to me what the relevance of a PhD in marine biology has to do with the class in holography? Because, well, it is science.
Yeah.
And I think that sums up, some of the academic situations that you run into teaching.
Yeah. Has the AGFA situation had an impact on you?
Well, when the AGFA situation first occurred, I pulled every string I could, and I contacted the White House, and I got the chairman of the Economic Council or something like that, at the White House, to contact directly the man who was in charge of AGFA over in Belgium. I got his name through the distributor here in New Jersey, and I did get them to compromise. They extended the deadline, and they did offer terms as well for some people.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was about as much as you could do. You can't tell a company not to cease production, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It is their prerogative. It's their product if they want to cease production. But I just felt that the way they were doing it was unfair to people who couldn't afford, a lot of artists who are in this field and students were just going to be left without anything. However, I will just say that, of course, I stocked up. I have years' supply of film, but I don't even know what to do with some of this stuff. But it'll probably go bad before I get to use it. But I will say that I've seen some of the other holographic film that's been coming out, and I think some of it's actually superior to what I've seen from AGFA.
Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to work with any of it yet?
I have played with it a little bit. I think some of the stuff from Germany is incredible, and I like the Russian film. I think they still have some work to do on getting it to be more consistent and have a longer shelf life, but I think that'll all shake out in time. I don't see it as a real issue, to be honest with you. It's just very Darwinian. In its own way, everything will settle out to its best possible way. And AGFA was getting pretty, how can we say, lethargic about innovation. They had lost all incentive because they saw no profit margin, and as they were slowly swallowed up by larger companies, I believe they're now a division of Bayer. What was the point? It's like Polaroid losing its interest in holography as they became a larger corporation.
What laser do you use to do most of your work? Are you working with a higher power helium neon, or are you with argon?
No, I work with medium and, if there is such a thing as a higher power helium neon laser, I guess I have the old Spectra, the 50 milliwatt Spectra, and the around 20 or 30 milliwatts is fine. But I got to tell you, I've on some occasions not cleaned the optics on my laser and just been really busy on projects where I have to knock off like a dozen 360-degree holograms for a single project, and somewhere in the middle of it start having just a moment where you just go like, gee, this is really getting to be difficult. Why isn't this working easily? And you check the power of the laser, and it's only putting out 10 milliwatts because it's just gotten so out of alignment, and you're still getting reasonable holograms. So I think we're about to reach a point where its solid state is taking over. If you talk about even, the crystal lasers that are now coming out, and I'm not talking about the pointers, but the better quality ones. I've seen there's a French company, was it Bordeaux Holographics, that's marketing one that puts out about 70 milliwatts laser diode, and because it's a little bit higher frequency, higher wavelength than the helium neon, it's much more effective on the film, which is more sensitive to these higher wavelengths. Yeah. So, it seems to be that it's, the next thing that'll happen is everything will switch over. Working with a gas tube is sort of stupid anyway.
Well, before we close out, we get a lot of kids that listen to this show through schools and just kids that really find lasers and holograms interesting. Is there anything that you would say to them? Because a lot of them probably in 8th grade, and they're saying, yes, I'd like to grow up, and I'd like to make holograms. I'd like to be a holographer. Would you have any message for them? Is it something that you would tell kids, yeah, go ahead and pursue it?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I know. Of course, you have to look a little bit into the future as far as where you think it's going to be in another 10 or 12 years.
I certainly am. That's why I say it's a very loaded question. I think they should pursue it for the purpose of, if you like anything, you should definitely pursue it. It's good for you to learn this medium. It does help you see things in a better way. However, as far as a future economically speaking in this medium, it is definitely a dicey medium to enter, as any holographer would honestly have to tell you. There are very few people that have survived in holography for any length of time. I'd say the lifespan of most holographers commercially is, what, about 3 to 5 years?
Wow.
Would you tend to agree with that?
I've seen a lot come and go.
Well,
I've seen a lot spend more than $1 million trying to make $1 million.
and fail.
Yeah.
And fail.
Exactly.
I mean, the guys just recently in New Hampshire, for instance, at, I believe they were called Holos.
Oh, yeah.
That was with Hans Belkagen's group.
Mm-hmm.
That failed miserably. They just had to sell out. How about Hughes Corporation?
Yeah,
They were into photopolymer, and
Yeah.
they recently just auctioned off all their equipment.
Yeah.
I could go through a list as long as my arm, or almost as long as the traffic jam I just pulled through. Not quite, but God, I mean, it's like a frightening story, like Scrooge, of all the people who have just fallen by the wayside. Some of them incredibly talented, certainly much more talented than I am. It's not certainly for lack of intellect or talent or financing, as you're saying, $1 million on some of these elaborate schemes to go nowhere. I think that holography is something best survived by a smaller company than a larger company at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not supportive enough, and continuous enough, that there are enough times where it's almost like an Aesop's fable where, we're talking about feast and famine, and if you don't put away for the times of famine,
Yeah, exactly.
that's what happens. You just disappear. And a large company with a big payroll, it is very hard to get through a dead period. It's very top-heavy. Look at Light Impressions, for instance. Steve McGrew started that company. I knew Steve from when he had zero back when he was working in Amsterdam at the little houseboats there. And, then he moved on to, was that whole...
Oh, the one out in Norristown.
Right, Holex.
Holex, yeah.
Oh, Larry and Jerry Goldberg, remember them?
Yeah.
Did you know those guys?
Yeah, they were neighbors.
Yeah, I
Next door
knew
to one
Larry.
another.
I knew
From
Larry.
what I understood.
Yeah, he used to come and buy from me back in the old days, and he had a nice little setup, a good company, and then he got into Est, and that was the end of it. It fell apart faster than you could say banana. And but Steve bought up the equipment that he needed from there, and then he went over to what was the next one? Holosonics in Richland, Washington, and they were into acoustical holography, and they were doing so. They had bought up, I believe, 96 patents in the late 70s in holography, and were intending to take over the industry. And I remember when they came to town, and their guy was trying to bully his way through with his patents. We were all supposed to be afraid of him. And no sooner did they buy up all the patents than they bankrupted. And, of course, Steve bought up their equipment once again and then was in a position to start, his own little company, Light Impressions, which, became a $1 million company. But the problem with once he became big, then he became subject to the same market problems that everyone else becomes subject to, that when suddenly work slowed down and he had this large organization of people to support, it just couldn't keep the pump primed.
Yeah.
And they bankrupted it. Well, they just went out of business suddenly. I don't think they even filed for bankruptcy. I think they just closed.
Just closed the doors.
Yeah. So, like I say, I don't know. I would recommend that they pursue holography. I don't know if they should think of it as a life's profession so much as a hobby. I think it's a great hobby. I encourage a lot of people to do this, and certainly lots of people who come here go home and set up their own little labs and make holograms from time to time, and it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. I mean, as you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't agree.
Yeah, we've both been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah, too long. My first job, believe it or not, it just scares me when I think about it, was in 1968, right here in New York at Time Inc., doing an exhibition of holograms.
What was that called, that exhibition?
A science tune-in, believe it or not. 1968. It was the first exhibition of holography in New York City ever. And strangely enough, I mean, this is like an aside totally that means nothing to anyone but an insider. Jody Burns came through there and saw the holograms and was so impressed that he went back and decided to learn, all about holography. And at the time he was going to, I believe, Lake Forest College, and he studied with Tung Jung. And then he and his girlfriend set up a little holography business, the New York Art Alliance, over on 20th Street on the west side here. And then when they broke up, she founded what was later to become the Museum of Holography, and her name is Posey Jackson.
Yeah.
So, it's just odd how, one person meets another, sees something, it sparks something else. And, gee, I remember the first day when the museum opened, and I was there literally the day they actually closed, when the doors closed for the last time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very odd to sit through 16 years of watching, these things come and go, and you begin to take a very long view of this medium. I think it has a big future in it. I really, really and honestly do. But I think that it isn't necessarily impending as a successful future right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the period of shakeout is far from over, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think that it may go on for many years before it finally catches. I mean, every kid loves holograms. I've never shown it to someone young who hasn't gotten off on it. I've never taught it to somebody who hasn't been totally thrilled at making their own hologram. It's just that, it's not commercial right now. There isn't a product that people are, I need this.
Yeah.
And that's a psychological thing. And since there's no mass marketing involved in holography, just small ventures here and there, I understand that Sony is involved with Steve Benton on some possible integral
camera
Desktop. For, pulsing, and shooting like a photomat type of booth type of thing. I don't know. I think that's another thing that's heading towards oblivion, unfortunately. One more idea that's definitely not where you want to go with holography. I've had actual people, investors, come to me and want to put up the money to do that, but I've discouraged them. I think it has to be a product, quite honestly. It has to be a very inexpensive product that does something that nothing else does, as opposed to the fact that it's just 3D. The fact that it's 3D says what it is, but it doesn't do something. It has to actually have a function. The old expression, form follows function. What is the function of this form? And there are things where it is functional. I mean, right now...
the holograms you just created are very functional for people.
Right, I think that, working from something, showing something that is, molecular or, how can we say, organic or architectural, I think it serves a tremendous purpose there. But I think even more than that, there are other things where we don't yet see it, probably because it's just too obvious, not that it's so difficult and incredibly intellectual. Rather, it's probably so simple that it's like you could just snap your fingers like, oh, my God, why didn't I see that? Of course, the hologram would make the perfect view site for a X. It's like, wow, you put this in front of this and you can see something and it's, it does this, it does that, and it's like, well, this is so clear. However, that's hindsight. When the person who comes along does recognize the obvious niche that holography fills better than anything ever could, then suddenly I think it'll become very commercial and very quickly because everything is in place. There are enough people who understand the technology, certainly worldwide, and you have enough manufacturers of mass-produced machine holograms now where the machine guys have marketed their machine to the point where, countries like India have a proliferation of holographic embossing machines up the wazoo, or Taiwan, or, and they're selling these things like there's a tremendous demand for them. But indeed, there is a legitimate thing. It is a very powerful medium, as is clear to anybody who, spends any time at all playing with holography. And it's a marvelous wonder. There is no question whatsoever that it is a joy to behold a hologram. Yeah, like I said, I think that ultimately it's a commercial thing, though. Something has to come along to make it economically viable. Otherwise, all you get to talk about is which company died next. And which is a sad thing, to live in the graveyard of dead holograms.
Jeez.
Well, look around us.
It's a big graveyard.
It is a very big graveyard, and it just continues to grow, and it's like a black hole sucking in people who have the, the get-rich-quick thing. Or then again, you have people like Tung Zhang who make, ridiculous claims constantly and manage to get, major media like CNN, publicizing it. And then, how do you fulfill this? I saw one on the CNN website. Someone emailed it to me because it was so hard to believe that you had to see this to believe it, where Tung Zhang is saying that his holograms are so real that his lab assistant couldn't tell whether it was Tung Zhang or the hologram. And it's like, yeah, Right. It's got my hologram floor. Oh, yeah. Someone's going to mistake me for a hologram I've made. Oh, yeah. Right, Frank. But, I mean, when you have claims like that, I mean, come on. How many junk mail things do you get where people think they can actually project an image into the middle of a room?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all
I cannot
the time.
believe constantly
All
everyone thinks that there's some sort of projector. I've had calls from people, and I'm serious. I've sat down on the phone with guys literally like Milton Berle and spoken for 20 minutes convincing him that he can't project his image in the middle of a Broadway stage, and it's not that I can't do it, it's that it doesn't exist,
Yeah. And they're hard to convince that it can't be done, too, because they're sure that it can.
And they think it's a matter of money. Well, what if I gave you $2 million? And it's like, well, I'd take a vacation. I mean, but it's not going to get your hologram. Trust me. But, it's very frustrating, because you don't see a public awareness of what holography really is. Rather, what you see is this media exaggeration of holography from television and from a few of the people in the business who don't care what they say, as long as they get their name in the press.
Yeah.
And, it hurts everybody who's legitimate. It really does. You just want to feel as though people are contacting us because they want us to do something that's doable, not to do the impossible.
Yeah, and when they call, they understand what it is that they're calling about.
At least briefly. I mean, I'm not asking for somebody to have a real deep understanding of the medium, but at least like, look, I want something three-dimensional of a chess piece. And you go like, okay, no problem, sure, we can do that. Or, gee, I don't do this particular type of holography. You should give a call over to, Larry Lieberman in Florida or Steve Province in Virginia, or, you want to at least have, something you can refer someone to. The real damage is when it's so insane that nothing that you can say, works, and the guy's going to get off the phone and call someone else afterwards, as if, and land up ultimately with someone who will just take his money and once again give the medium a bad name.
Well, I had a guy email me about a restaurant that was opening in California that was going to be a chain. He was asked to invest in it, and it was going to actually have holographic figures come around and entertain at the tables. Oh,
God. Holographic lap dancing. I would like that. Hey,
I read that. It's like,
safe lap dancing, right?
Yeah.
You can't get into trouble there.
Well, thanks for taking the time.
Well,
I appreciate it.
Hope this goes well. Cool.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Jason, thank you very much.
Okay, you take care.
Okay.